Human nature is just the same all over the world, and girls are just the same everywhere. The girls in Venice are just like the girls in Cleveland. They wear their dresses cut by us, certainly, and put the most gorgeous gussets on 'em and gauze and all that sort of thing, and wad up their hair behind so bewitchingly and prop it up with a crupper, and they keep a pet kangaroo so as they can see how to do the Grecian bend right. The girls in Venice are precisely like the girls in Pittsburgh. A Venice girl is as much like a Pittsburgh girl as one blessed angel is like another. That was a close place, but I rubbed through. I love the whole sex. My own mother was a woman. Our Vandals hurried away from Venice and scattered abroad everywhere. You could find them breaking specimens from the dilapidated tomb of Romeo and Juliet at Padua and infesting the picture galleries of Florence and risking their necks on the Leaning Tower of Pisa and snuffing sulphur fumes on the summit of Vesuvius and burrowing among the exhumed wonders of Herculaneum and Pompeii. And you might see them with spectacles on and blue cotton umbrellas under their arms, benignantly contemplating Rome from the venerable arches of the Colosseum. And finally we sailed from Naples and in due time anchored before the Piraeus, the seaport of Athens in Greece. But the quarantine was in force, and so they set a guard of soldiers to watch us and would not let us go ashore. However, I and 3 other Vandals took a boat and muffled the oars and slipped ashore at 11:30 at night and dodged the guard successfully. Then we made a wide circuit around the slumbering town, avoiding all roads and houses, for they'd about as soon hang a body as not for violating the quarantine laws in those countries. We got around the town without any accident and then struck out across the Attic plain, steering straight for Athens, over rocks and hills and brambles and everything, with Mount Helicon for a landmark. And so we tramped 5 or 6 miles. The Attic plain is a mighty uncomfortable plain to travel in, even if it is so historical. The armed guards got after us 3 times and flourished their gleaming gun barrels in the moonlight because they thought we were stealing grapes occasionally. And the fact is we were. For we found by and by that the brambles they tripped us up so often were grapevines. But these people in the country didn't know that we were quarantine blockade runners, and so they only scared us and jawed Greek at us and let us go instead of arresting us. We didn't care about Athens particularly, but we wanted to see the famous Acropolis and its ruined temples, and we did. We climbed the steep hill of the Acropolis about 1 in the morning and tried to storm that grand old fortress that had scorned the battles and sieges of 3,000 years. We had the garrison out mighty quick, 4 Greeks, and we bribed them to betray the citadel and unlock the gates. In a moment we stood in the presence of the noblest ruins we had ever seen, the most elegant, the most graceful, the most imposing. The renowned Parthenon towered above us, and about us were the wreck of what were once the snowy marble temples of Hercules and a second Minerva, and another whose name I have forgotten. Most of the Parthenon's grand columns are still standing, but the roof is gone. As we wandered down the marble-paved length of this mighty temple, the scene was strangely impressive. Here and there, in lavish profusion, were gleaming white statues of men and women propped against blocks of marble, some of them armless, some without legs, others headless, but all looking mournful and sentient and startlingly human. They rose up and confronted the midnight intruder on every side. They stared at him with stony eyes from unlooked-for nooks and recesses. They peered at him over fragmentary heaps far down the desolate corridors. They barred his way in the midst of the broad forum and solemnly pointed with handless arms the way from the sacred fane. And through the roofless temple the moon looked down and banded the floor and darkened the scattered fragments and broken statues with the slanting shadows of the columns. What a world of ruined sculpture was about us, stood up in rows, stacked up in piles, scattered broadcast over the wide area of the Acropolis, were hundreds of crippled statues of all sizes and of the most exquisite workmanship, and vast fragments of marble that once belonged to the entablatures, covered with bas-relief representing battles and sieges, ships of war with 3 and 4 tiers of oars, pageants and processions, everything one could think of. We walked out into the grass-grown, fragment-strewn court beyond the Parthenon. It startled us every now and then to see a stony white face stare suddenly up at us out of the grass with its dead eyes. The place seemed alive with ghosts. We half expected to see the Athenian heroes of 20 centuries ago glide out of the shadows and steal into the old temple they knew so well and regarded with such boundless pride. The full moon was riding high in the cloudless heavens now. We sauntered carelessly and unthinkingly to the edge of the lofty battlements of the citadel and looked down, and lo, a vision, and such a vision, Athens, by moonlight. All the beauty in all the world combined could not rival it. The prophet that thought the splendors of the New Jerusalem were revealed to him surely saw this instead. It lay in the level plain right under our feet, all spread abroad like a picture, and we looked down upon it as we might have looked from a balloon. We saw no semblance of a street, but every house, every window, every clinging vine, every projection was as distinct and sharply marked as if the time were noonday. And yet there was no glare, no glitter, nothing harsh or repulsive. The silent city was flooded with the mellowest light that ever streamed from the moon and seemed like some living creature wrapped in peaceful slumber. On its further side was a little temple whose delicate pillars and ornate front glowed with a rich luster that chained the eye like a spell. And near by the palace of the king reared its creamy walls out of the midst of a great garden of shrubbery that was flecked all over with a random shower of amber lights. A spray of golden sparks that lost their brightness in the glory of the moon and glinted softly upon the sea of dark foliage like the pallid stare of the Milky Way. Overhead the stately columns, majestic still in their ruin, underfoot the dreaming city, in the distance the silver sea. Not on the broad earth is there another picture half so beautiful. We got back to the ship safely just as the day was dawning. We had walked upon pavements that had been presented by Plato, Aristotle, Demosthenes, Socrates, Phocion, Euclid, Xenophon, Herodotus, Diogenes, and 100 others of deathless fame, and were satisfied. We got to stealing grapes again on the way back, and 6 rascally guards with muskets and pistols captured us and marched us in the center of a hollow square nearly to the sea, till we were well beyond all the graperies. Military escort. I never traveled in so much state in all my life. I leave the Vandal here. I have not time to follow him further, nor our Vandals to Constantinople and Smyrna and the Holy Land, Egypt, islands of the sea, to Russia, and his visit to the Emperor. But I wish I could tell of that visit of our gang of Quaker City Vandals to the grandest monarch of the age, America's stanch, old, steadfast friend Alexander II, autocrat of Russia. The emperor is a man of noble presence, tall and spare, has a kind blue eye, looks great and good in every inch an emperor. It was a novel sensation to stand in the presence of this man, chatting easily and pleasantly like any ordinary mortal and so simply dressed. Yet, whose slightest word is law to 70 million of human beings, who could open his lips and ships would fly through the waves, locomotives would speed over the plains, couriers would hurry from village to village, 100 telegraphs would flash the word to the four corners of an empire that stretches its vast proportions over a seventh part of the habitable globe, and a countless multitude of men would spring to do his bidding. If this man sprained his ankle, 1,000,000 miles of telegraph would carry the news over mountains, valleys, under the trackless sea, and 10,000 newspapers would prate of it. If he were grievously ill, all the nations would know it before the sun rose again. If he dropped lifeless where he stood, the effect might be felt in the furthest lands of Christendom. Yet, where I stood, worm of the dust as I am, I could have overturned this god, I could have knocked this colossus down with my feeble fist, but I restrained myself. If there is a moral to this lecture, it is an injunction to all Vandals to travel. I am glad the American Vandal goes abroad. It does him good. It makes a better man of him. It rubs out a multitude of his old unworthy biases and prejudices. It aids his religion, for it enlarges his charity and his benevolence, and it broadens his views of men and things. It deepens his generosity and his compassion for the failings and shortcomings of his fellow creatures. Contact with men of various nations and many creeds teaches him that there are other people in the world besides his own little clique, and other opinions as worthy of attention and respect as his own. He finds that he and his are not the most momentous matters in the universe. Cast into trouble and misfortune in strange lands and being mercifully cared for by those he never saw before, he begins to learn the best lesson of all, that one which culminates in the conviction that God puts something good and something lovable in every man his hands create, that the world is not a cold, harsh, cruel prison house, stocked with all manner of selfishness and hate and wickedness. It liberalizes the Vandal to travel. You never saw a bigoted, opinionated, stubborn, narrow-minded, self-conceited, almighty mean man in your life, but he had stuck in one place since he was born and thought God made the world in dyspepsia and bile for his especial comfort and satisfaction. So I say, by all means, let the American Vandal go on traveling, and let no man discourage him. Remember, our Vandals in the Quaker City will never regret their pilgrimage. They learned something, matters that were useful, other matters that were only pleasant. Much that they learned, much that they saw, much that they heard, they will forget. But still, a store of softly tinted images will remain in their memories, and float through their reveries and dreams for many and many a year to come. They will remember something.